Ever feel like some people just operate on a different level? I'm talking about those individuals who seem to have a built-in clock, an internal rhythm that's just perfectly in sync with the world. We're diving deep into the fascinating world of the human metronome. What gives certain people this incredible, almost superhuman sense of timing? Is it something you're born with, or can you actually train yourself to have it? Let's start with the basics. What even is a human metronome? Think of a musician who can play perfectly in time without a click track, or a dancer whose every move lands precisely on the beat every single time. It's this innate ability to perceive, remember, and reproduce time intervals with astonishing accuracy. We all have some sense of time, right? We know if a few seconds have passed or a few minutes. But for these individuals, it's like having a high-precision Swiss watch ticking away inside their brain. So, where does this ability come from? A huge part of it lies in our brains, specifically in areas like the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, and the supplementary motor area. The cerebellum, often called the little brain, is a powerhouse for timing and coordination. It helps us fine-tune our movements and, you guessed it, keep a steady rhythm. The basal ganglia, deep within our brain, are crucial for habit formation and controlling voluntary movements, including starting and stopping actions at just the right moment. It's like the brain's internal conductor, making sure every section of the orchestra comes in on cue. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so it's all in the brain. Does that mean you either have it or you don't? Well, not exactly. Genetics definitely plays a role. Some people are just naturally wired to be better at time perception. Studies have shown that variations in certain genes related to dopamine, a key neurotransmitter, can influence our internal clock. Dopamine is all about reward and motivation, and it also helps regulate our perception of time. So, a little genetic lottery luck can give you a head start. But here's the exciting part. Practice makes perfect, or at least much, much better. Think about professional drummers. They spend thousands upon thousands of hours practicing with a metronome. This isn't just about muscle memory in their hands and feet. It's about training their brain to internalize the beat. They are literally rewiring their neural pathways to create a stronger, more reliable internal clock. Their brains learn to anticipate the beat, to feel it before it even happens. It becomes second nature, as automatic as breathing. This process is called auditory motor synchronization. It's our ability to sync our movements with an external rhythm, like tapping your foot to a song. The more you do it, the better your brain gets at predicting the timing. It's a feedback loop. You hear the beat, you move to the beat, your brain checks if you are on time, and then it adjusts for the next one. Over time, the need for the external beat the metronome lessens, because your brain has created its own. Let's look at some incredible real-world examples. Take the legendary drummer, Buddy Rich. He was famous for his blistering speed, his creativity, and his flawless timing. People who played with him said it was like playing with a machine. His tempo was that solid. He didn't just play on the beat. He owned the beat. He could push it, pull it, play around it, but he always knew exactly where one was. This wasn't just raw talent. It was decades of relentless dedication to his craft. It's not just in music either. Think about elite athletes. A professional basketball player shooting a free throw has a highly refined internal sense of timing. The rhythm of their dribble, the bend of their knees, the release of the ball, it's all a beautifully timed sequence. A study on golfers found that the best players had a remarkably consistent tempo in their swing, a rhythm they could replicate time and time again under immense pressure. Their success depends on this internal metronome. Even in everyday life, this skill is super useful. Chefs who can perfectly time multiple dishes, public speakers who know just the right pause to add for dramatic effect. They all using a finely tuned sense of rhythm and timing. They've trained their brains to manage time intervals effectively. So, can you become a human metronome? The answer is a resounding yes. You can get a lot closer than you think. If you want to improve your own internal clock, the best thing you can do is start paying attention to time. Get a metronome app on your phone. Set it to a simple 60 beats per minute. That's 1 beat per second. Just listen to it. Then, try tapping along with it. See how long you can stay perfectly in sync. Once you get comfortable with that, try this exercise. Let the metronome run for a minute, then turn it off and keep tapping what you think the tempo is. After another minute, turn the metronome back on. Were you close? Did you speed up or slow down? This is direct feedback for your brain. It's like lifting weights for your internal clock. Another great way is to engage with music actively. Don't just listen to it in the background. Pick a song and focus on the drums or the bass line. Try to tap out the rhythm. Better yet, learn an instrument. Nothing forces you to develop a sense of time like having to play in time with other people. Dancing is another fantastic way. Moving your whole body to a beat creates a powerful connection between your brain and your muscles, strengthening that all-important auditory motor synchronization. It's also about mindfulness. Being present in the moment helps you perceive the passage of time more accurately. When our minds are racing and we're distracted, our sense of time can get all warped. Think about how time flies when you're having fun, or how it drags when you're bored. By practicing mindfulness, you can anchor your perception of time, making it more stable and consistent. Let's go back to the brain for a second. When you practice these timing exercises, you're promoting something called neuroplasticity. That's your brain's amazing ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. The parts of your brain responsible for timing, the cerebellum and basal ganglia, are literally getting a workout. The connections become stronger, faster, and more efficient. So, you're not just learning a skill. You're physically changing your brain for the better. Consider the story of a patient known in scientific literature as DL. After a brain injury, DL completely lost his ability to perceive rhythm. He couldn't tap his foot to music or tell if a beat was fast or slow. His case helped scientists understand just how critical specific brain regions are for our sense of time. But it also highlights that for most of us, this machinery is intact and just waiting to be trained. So, while some people might be born with a bit of a rhythmic advantage, the human metronomes we admire, the virtuosic musicians and elite athletes, are almost always the product of immense dedication. They have consciously and painstakingly honed their internal sense of time over years. They've embraced the metronome, not as a crutch, but as a training partner, until they became the metronome themselves. The journey to developing a great sense of time is a perfect example of how talent and hard work intertwine. The potential is within all of us. Our brains are built with the necessary hardware. All it takes is the right software, the consistent practice, the focused attention, and the desire to improve. So next time you hear a drummer laying down a rock-solid groove or see an athlete perform a perfectly timed maneuver, take a moment to appreciate the incredible biological computer that makes it all possible. And maybe, just maybe, be inspired to start training your own. Start small. Tap your foot. Clap your hands. Feel the rhythm. Who knows? You might just uncover the human metronome hiding inside you. Thank you so much for watching and exploring this with me. If you enjoyed this journey into the brain and the beat, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the amazing things humans can do. Let me know in the comments, what's an example of a human metronome that inspires you? Until next time, stay curious. The practice room suddenly felt too small, too bright, too full of air that Maya couldn't quite breathe. Her grandmother had always been sharp as a knife. She could recite poetry she'd learned 70 years ago. She could remember every student she'd ever taught, every meal she'd ever cooked for the family during spring festival. She was supposed to be the strong one, the constant one. Does she still play piano? Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Her mother's pause said everything. She sits at the piano sometimes. Just sits there with her hands in her lap, looking at the keys like she's trying to remember what they're for. Last Tuesday, she pressed a few notes, just random ones, and then she started crying. I don't think she knows why she was crying. She just was. They talked for 20 more minutes, but Maya barely remembered the conversation afterward. Something about medications, about care facilities, about how these things progress. Her mother tried to be strong, tried to be practical, but Maya could hear the grief underneath every word. This was her mother's mother, after all. The woman who'd raised her, sacrificed for her, shaped her into who she was. When the call ended, Maya sat alone in the practice room, staring at the Chopin music on the stand. The Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece about memory, about longing, about beauty that exists in the space between sadness and joy. She'd been playing it for 4 months without ever really thinking about what it meant. Her grandmother used to say something when Maya was little, back when they'd sit together at that old upright piano in Shanghai. She'd say it in Mandarin, her voice gentle but firm. Piano is not about the fingers, Zhou Bao. It is about what the fingers carry from your heart. Maya had always nodded and smiled, but she'd never really understood. She'd thought music was about discipline, practice, getting the notes right, making your teachers proud, getting into a good school, building a career. But sitting there in practice room 7B, with the afternoon light slanting through the windows and the distant sound of a cello student running scales down the hall, Maya realized she'd been playing music her entire life without ever really letting her heart into it. She'd built a wall between her emotions and her fingers, thinking that was what professionalism meant. She opened the Chopin music again and started to play. Same notes, same tempo, same dynamics. But this time, as her fingers moved across the keys, all she could think about was her grandmother's hands. Those hands that had once been so strong and sure, guiding her little fingers to the right positions. Those hands that had applauded at her first recital when she was 6 years old. Those hands that now sat motionless in her lap, forgetting what they'd once known how to do. Maya made it through 16 measures before her vision blurred with tears. She stopped playing, wiped her eyes, and looked at the clock. She'd missed music theory entirely. In 48 hours, she'd stand in front of 3 judges who would expect her to play this piece with technical perfection. And she would. She'd give them every note exactly as written. But would they hear anything else? Would they hear a heart? Would they hear a story? Would they hear the truth that Maya was only now beginning to understand? That all the technique in the world means nothing if you read too afraid to let yourself be vulnerable through the music? She didn't have an answer. Not yet. But for the first time in her entire musical career, Maya Chen was starting to ask the right questions. The morning of September 17th arrived too quickly. Maya had barely slept, tossing in her dorm bed while her roommate Jenna snored peacefully across the room. By 6 a.m., she gave up trying and went to the conservatory's cafe for coffee. Her hands shook slightly as she added cream and sugar, though she couldn't tell if it was from nerves or caffeine withdrawal. The jury exam was scheduled for 10:30 in Recital Hall C, the smallest of the conservatory's 3 performance spaces. Maya had performed there twice before, once for a freshman showcase and once for a chamber music collaboration. She knew every detail of that room. The way the morning light came through the high windows on the east wall. The slight squeak the piano bench made when you adjusted it. The smell of old wood and carpet that had absorbed decades of nervous student sweat. She arrived at 10:15, clutching her sheet music even though she didn't need it anymore. The hallway outside the recital hall was empty and quiet, which somehow made everything worse. At least if there were other students around, she could pretend this was normal, routine, just another performance. But the silence made it feel like what it actually was, a judgment. Through the small window in the door, Maya could see the 3 professors arranging themselves behind the long oak table. Dr. Eleanor Hartman sat in the middle, perfectly erect in a black blazer, her gray hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She was arranging papers with the kind of precise movements that made Maya think of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Professor James Wu sat to her left, wearing what looked like a Radiohead t-shirt under a brown corduroy jacket. He was cleaning his glasses with the edge of his shirt, squinting at something on his phone. At least he seemed relaxed, which was more than Maya could say for herself. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo completed the trio on the right, wearing a bright yellow blouse that stood out like sunshine against the room's dark wood paneling. She was the only one who looked up when Maya's shadow crossed the door window, and she offered a small, encouraging smile. Somehow that made Maya's stomach twist even tighter. At exactly 10:29, the door opened. Dr. Hartman's teaching assistant, a grad student named Marcus, poked his head out. "Maya Chun, we're ready for you." The walk from the hallway to the piano felt like crossing an ocean. Maya's footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. The Steinway grand piano sat in the center of the small stage area, its black surface so polished she could see her reflection in it. A reflection that looked terrified. "Good morning, Miss Chun," Dr. Hartman said without smiling. Her accent made every word sound formal and serious. Please begin when you are ready. Maya sat down on the bench, adjusted it again, placed her sheet music on the stand, even though she wouldn't need to look at it. These were all stalling tactics, and she knew it. Finally, she took a deep breath, positioned her hands over the keys, and began. The camera pans across a grand concert hall, settling on Maya Chen, poised at a Steinway grand piano. She takes a deep breath, and the first delicate notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major fill the silence. Her fingers dance across the keys, a display of flawless technique, each note perfectly articulated, each run executed with precision. The music is beautiful, technically perfect, yet there's a coldness to it, a mechanical quality that keeps the listener at a distance. Seated in the dim hall are three figures: the stern Dr. Hartman, the thoughtful Professor Wu, and the perceptive Dr. Okonkwo. They listen intently, their expressions a mixture of admiration for her skill and a growing sense of disappointment. They exchange glances, a silent consensus passing between them. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the music. Stop! Maya's fingers freeze mid-arpeggio. The abrupt silence is more jarring than the music itself. It's Dr. Hartman, his voice echoing in the empty hall, sharp and unforgiving. Maya looks up, her heart pounding, confusion clouding her features. She was playing perfectly. What could possibly be wrong? Miss Chen, Hartman begins, his tone clinical. Technically, your performance is impeccable. Every note is where it should be. The dynamics are observed. The tempo is precise. It is, by all accounts, a perfect execution of the score. He pauses, letting the weight of his next words settle. And yet, it is entirely empty. Professor Wu leans forward, her voice softer, but no less direct. Maya, where are you in this music? We hear Chopin's notes, but we don't hear your voice. It's like listening to a beautifully programmed machine. There's no heart, no soul. Dr. Okonkwo nods in agreement, his gaze penetrating. Music is not just about hitting the right keys at the right time. It's about storytelling. Chopin poured his longing, his joy, his sorrow into this piece. What are you telling us? What part of your own story are you sharing through his notes? Right now, all we hear is silence. Maya is stunned. Her entire life has been a relentless pursuit of technical perfection. She's sacrificed friendships, hobbies, and countless hours of her youth, all dedicated to mastering her craft. She's won competitions, earned scholarships, and has always been praised for her flawless playing. No one has ever accused her of being soulless. The criticism stings, a deep and personal wound. I don't understand, she stammers, her voice barely a whisper. I've practiced this piece for months. I've studied every marking, every historical interpretation. And that is the problem, Hartman retorts. You've studied it, but you haven't felt it. You've replicated it, but you haven't lived it. This is not a technical exercise, Miss Chen. This is the final jury for the most prestigious conservatory program in the country. We are not training technicians. We are nurturing artists. His words hang in the air, heavy and final. Dismissal. The thought sends a wave of panic through her. Everything she has worked for, her entire identity, is on the verge of collapsing. Tears well in her eyes, blurring the black and white keys before her. Professor Wu, seeing her distress, softens her tone. Maya, we see the potential in you. Your gift is undeniable, but talent without emotion is a hollow thing. An artist must be vulnerable, must be willing to connect with the deepest parts of themselves and share that with the world. You are hiding behind your technique. Maya looks down at her hands, the hands that have always been her greatest asset, now feeling like foreign objects. She thinks of the hours spent in solitude, the metronome a constant, unforgiving companion. Had she been so focused on the how that she had completely forgotten the why? Dr. Okonkwo speaks again, a challenge in his voice. We are at a crossroads, Miss Chen. We cannot, in good conscience, pass a student who demonstrates such a profound disconnect from the emotional core of the art form. However, he shares a look with his colleagues, who give him a subtle nod. We are willing to offer you a rare opportunity, an exception. We are giving you 2 weeks. 2 weeks to go away from this hall, away from the metronome, away from your technical drills. We want you to find this piece again. No, we want you to find yourself within this piece. Connect with it. Discover what Chopin's Nocturne means to you personally. Find your story in his. Dr. Hartman concludes with a grave warning. 2 weeks, Miss Chen. You will return and play this piece for us one more time. If you can show us your soul, you will continue in the program. If you present us with the same perfect, empty shell, you will be dismissed. The choice is yours. The weight of their decision settles upon her. It's not just an exam anymore. It's a quest. A journey to rediscover not just the music, but the musician herself. She has 2 weeks to dismantle a lifetime of training and rebuild it on a foundation of feeling and vulnerability. With a trembling nod, Maya rises from the piano bench. The grand hall, once a symbol of her ambition, now feels like a courtroom where her very essence as an artist has been judged and found wanting. She walks away from the piano, leaving the polished instrument behind. Her journey doesn't lead to a practice room, but out into the world, into her own past, into the messy, complicated, and beautiful landscape of human emotion. The clock is ticking. She has 14 days to find her soul. Thanks for watching. What do you think Maya will do next? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to see what happens in part 2. We'll see you in the next one. The words hit Maya like ice water. A review to determine if she should continue. That was conservatory speak, for you might get kicked out. She'd worked her entire life to get here. 16 years of piano lessons, countless competitions, a near-perfect application portfolio. She'd turned down a full scholarship to a state school just to come to Boston. Her parents had been so proud. And now, all of that was at risk because she couldn't make her playing sound emotional enough. Dr. Okonkwo's voice softened. Do you understand what we're asking? Maya nodded, but honestly, she wasn't sure she did. How do you make music personal? How do you put yourself into notes someone else wrote almost 200 years ago? She'd spent her entire musical education learning to play things exactly as written, to respect the composer's intentions, to follow every single marking on the page. And now they were telling her that wasn't enough? You may go, Dr. Hartman said, making a note on his paper. We will see you on September 30th at 10:30 a.m. Use these 2 weeks wisely. Maya stood up from the piano bench, her legs unsteady. She gathered her sheet music with shaking hands and walked toward the door. Behind her, she could hear the professors already beginning to discuss the next student, their voices moving on from her failure. In the hallway, Marcus, the teaching assistant, gave her a sympathetic look. Rough morning? He asked quietly. Maya couldn't answer. She just walked past him, down the hallway, down the stairs, and out into the September sunshine that suddenly felt too bright and too cheerful for how she was feeling. Students were scattered across the conservatory's front lawn, some practicing on portable keyboards with headphones, others studying scores on the grass. Normal life was continuing normally. Maya sank onto a bench near the entrance and pulled out her phone. 2 weeks. 14 days to figure out how to do something she'd apparently been failing at for her entire musical career. 14 days to learn how to stop hiding and start feeling. The question that kept circling in her mind was the one Dr. Okonkwo had asked. Why had she chosen this piece? And underneath that question was an even scarier one. Had she ever chosen any piece for the right reasons? Had she ever played anything that actually mattered to her? Or had she spent 16 years building a perfect technical skill set while completely missing the entire point of music? The tears came suddenly, without warning. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears sliding down her cheeks while students walked past, probably assuming she'd just failed an exam. Which, in a way, she had, just not in the way they'd think. But somewhere underneath the fear and embarrassment, there was something else. A small but persistent memory. It was her mother's voice on the phone just 2 days ago. She just stared and stared, and then she asked me who the girl in the cap and gown was. Her grandmother, the one who had taught her that piano was about what the fingers carry from your heart, no longer remembered her. And Maya had been playing music without her heart for so long that even her own teachers could hear the emptiness. 2 weeks to change everything. 2 weeks to figure out how to be honest in a language she'd been speaking dishonestly for years. Maya wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and stood up. She didn't know how she was going to fix this yet, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't keep doing what she'd been doing. Sometimes the kindest thing someone can do for you is to stop you in the middle of your performance and tell you the truth, even when that truth is hard to hear, even when it feels like failure. Because the real failure would have been letting her continue down a path that led nowhere meaningful, playing beautiful music beautifully, but never actually saying anything worth hearing. Maya's first instinct was to practice more. It's what she'd always done when faced with a challenge. More hours, more repetition, more precision. By the afternoon of September 17th, just 3 hours after her failed jury exam, she was back in practice room 7B, attacking the Nocturne with renewed determination. She played it louder. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe the judges wanted more dynamic contrast, more power. She pushed into the keys harder, making the melody ring out above the accompaniment. When she finished, she recorded herself on her phone and played it back. It sounded aggressive and wrong, like someone yelling when they should be whispering. Okay, so not louder. Maybe softer then. Maybe they wanted more delicacy, more refinement. She played it again, barely touching the keys, making everything whisper quiet and gentle. The recording sounded timid and nervous, like a mouse trying not to be noticed. By 6 p.m., she'd played the piece 14 times, each attempt a different experiment in dynamics, tempo, and touch. None of them sounded right. Her shoulders ached. Her lower back was starting to spasm from sitting in the same position for so long. And she was no closer to understanding what "tell us your story" actually meant. Jenna found her there at 7:30, still at the piano, staring at the keys like they held some secret code she couldn't crack. "Hey," Jenna said gently, leaning against the doorframe. "I heard what happened. Marcus texted me. You okay?" Maya laughed, but it came out bitter. "Do I look okay? I have 13 days to figure out how to completely change the way I play music, or I might get kicked out of the conservatory." Jenna came in and sat on the floor beside the piano, her back against the wall. She was still in her dance clothes from movement class, her dark hair pulled up in a messy bun. "Can I ask you something? What do you feel when you play that piece?" "I feel like I need to get the notes right," Maya said automatically. "No, I mean, what emotions does it bring up? Like, when you hear the melody, what does it make you feel?" Maya stared at the sheet music. What did she feel? Anxiety, mostly. Fear of messing up. Worry about what the judges will think. Jenna made a face. "But that's not what the music is about. That's what your situation is about. I mean, have you ever played something just because it made you happy? Or sad? Or reminded you of something important?" The question hung in the air. Maya opened her mouth to answer and realized she didn't have one. She'd chosen pieces because teachers recommended them, because they'd look good on college applications, because they fit competition requirements. But had she ever chosen something just because it moved her? This story about Maya's journey isn't just about music. It's about finding our own voice in everything we do. It's about breaking free from the pressure to be perfect and instead learning to be authentic. Many of us, in our careers, hobbies, or even our relationships, focus so much on getting the notes right that we forget to listen to our own hearts. If you've ever felt like you're just going through the motions, or that you've lost the passion that once drove you, maybe it's time to ask yourself the same questions Maya faced. Why are you doing what you're doing? What story do you want to tell? Finding the answer might not be easy, but it's the first step toward creating something truly meaningful. If you're struggling with finding your purpose or feel overwhelmed by pressure, please know that support is available. Reaching out to a mental health professional or a support group can provide you with the tools and community to navigate these challenges. You are not alone, and help is just a phone call or click away. You can find resources in the description below. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that explores the heart of our passions. See you next time. Have you ever felt like you're just going through the motions, trying to be what everyone else wants you to be? That's exactly where Maya, a young pianist at a top conservatory, found herself. She had a make-or-break exam looming, and the piece she had to play, a Chopin Nocturne, felt completely out of reach. Her professor told her she lacked soul, that she played with perfect technique, but no real feeling. The question was, how do you learn to feel? So Maya went on a mission. First stop, YouTube. She spent hours watching the greats. She studied Vladimir Ashkenazy's elegant, restrained performance from the 80s. Then she watched Lang Lang's dramatic, theatrical interpretation, full of sweeping gestures. And finally, Maria Jo Opier's intimate, secretive recording. She tried to become each of them. She copied Ashkenazy's hand positions, mimicked Lang Lang's dramatic swaying, and even tried to replicate the exact pedaling she saw in Pyra's video. But it was no use. When she played, it felt all wrong, like wearing clothes that didn't fit. She wasn't finding her own voice. She was just doing a bad impression of someone else's. And that felt even worse than having no voice at all. Her frustration was mounting. Next, she tried calling her old high school piano teacher, Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Henderson was always warm and encouraging, the kind of teacher who gave you gold star stickers, even when you were a teenager. Maya explained her struggle, her voice trembling slightly. After a long pause, Mrs. Henderson offered her advice. "Music is like water, dear," she said. "You can't force it. You have to let it flow through you naturally. Stop thinking so much and just start feeling. Let go." Maya hung up the phone feeling more lost than ever. Let it flow? Just feel? It sounded nice, but what did it actually mean? It was like telling someone to just be confident. Great advice in theory, but completely useless in practice. How do you just let go when you're trying so hard to hold on? Her next idea took her to the conservatory's massive music library. She thought that maybe understanding the history behind the piece would unlock its secrets. She dove deep, spending hours reading about Chopin's life. She learned he wrote this nocturne around 1830, when he was just 20 years old and a new arrival in Paris. She read that nocturnes were meant to capture the intimate, personal moods of nighttime. She studied detailed analyses of the music's structure, its harmonies, its place in the romantic piano world. She filled notebooks with notes, highlighting key passages in 3 different colors, drawing charts and diagrams. She was armed with knowledge. But when she returned to the practice room, the music sounded even more stiff and mechanical than before. Her brain was so crammed with historical context, technique, and a desperate need for emotion that there was no room left for anything real to happen. By day 9, with only 5 days left until the exam, panic started to set in. She felt like she was actually getting worse. She'd practiced so much her fingers were raw, and she wasn't sleeping. She started having stress dreams where the piano keys would turn into jello right under her hands during the exam. In a moment of desperation, she tried something completely different. She downloaded a meditation app for performance anxiety. She sat in the small practice room, closed her eyes, and listened to a soothing voice guiding her to breathe deeply and imagine herself surrounded by a golden light. The voice told her to visualize her success, to see herself playing beautifully, to hear the judges applauding, but it was impossible. Every time she tried to picture success, the only image that came to mind was her professor's disappointed face. The voice kept repeating, "Release your tension," but Maya's shoulders were locked up tight around her ears. After 20 minutes of this, she gave up. She went back to practicing scales. At least scales made sense. They were predictable. They were safe. The next day, just 4 days before the exam, she decided to strip everything away. She went back to the absolute basics. No emotion, no history, no trying to copy anyone. Just the notes. She played the nocturne in agonizingly slow motion, focusing on each individual sound, trying to hear it purely without any baggage. She was about halfway through the piece when something inside her just snapped. She had been working on this single piece for months. She'd analyzed it, copied it, meditated on it, and researched it to death. And after all that, she still had absolutely no idea what she was doing. In a sudden burst of pure frustration, her hands came crashing down on the keyboard. It wasn't a chord. It was a harsh, ugly, dissonant smash of notes that echoed violently in the tiny room. The sound was wrong. It was violent. But for the first time in 10 days, it was completely and totally honest. It felt amazing. So she did it again and again. She slammed her hands on the keys, creating chaos, making the beautiful grand piano scream. It wasn't music anymore. It was her frustration, her anger, her fear, and her exhaustion, all pouring out through her fingertips. It was the sound of her breaking point. And then the dam broke. She put her head down on the music stand and she cried. Not just a few polite tears, but real gut-wrenching sobs that came from a deep, hidden place. She cried about the exam, about her grandmother, about feeling like she didn't belong at this prestigious school. She cried for the 16 years she'd been praised for her perfect technique while being told she had no soul. She cried because she didn't know how to be vulnerable, how to open up, how to be anything other than perfect. And as she sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of her own frustration, a quiet space began to open up. The storm had passed. Her mind, once so cluttered, was finally empty. She lifted her head, her face wet with tears. She looked at the keys, and with trembling fingers, she began to play again. But this time, something was different. This time, it wasn't about being perfect. It was just about being real. Thanks for watching. If you've ever felt like Maya, know that you're not alone. Sometimes our biggest breakthroughs come right after our biggest breakdowns. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time. A knock on the practice room door made her lift her head. Through her tears, she could see a blurry figure in the small window. Great. Someone had heard her meltdown and was coming to check if she was okay. She quickly wiped her face with her sleeve and opened the door. It was Dr. Okonkwo. Maya's heart sank. Of all the people to witness her breakdown, it had to be one of her judges. "I'm sorry," Maya said quickly, her voice still thick from crying. I'm sorry for the noise." Dr. Okonkwo smiled gently. "I was walking by and heard something that sounded like real emotion for once. First genuine thing I've heard from this practice room in a while." She paused. "Can I come in?" Maya nodded, too exhausted to be embarrassed anymore. Dr. Okonkwo came in and closed the door behind her. She didn't sit at the piano bench. Instead, she leaned against the wall, her yellow scarf bright against the room's beige paint. "You're trying too hard," she said simply. Maya let out a laugh that was half sob. "The exam is in 4 days. How can I be trying too hard? You're trying to manufacture emotion. You're trying to make yourself feel things on command. That's not how it works." Dr. Okonkwo crossed her arms, but her expression was kind. "Let me ask you something different. What's happening in your life right now? Like outside of this exam? What's on your mind?" Maya hesitated. What did her personal life have to do with Chopin? But something about Dr. Okonkwo's gentle insistence made her answer. "My grandmother. She has dementia. She doesn't remember anyone anymore. The grandmother who taught you to play." Maya nodded, surprised Dr. Okonkwo knew that detail. "How did you mentioned it in your conservatory application essay. About learning piano at age 4, sitting on your grandmother's lap." Dr. Okonkwo moved closer. "So you're dealing with that grief, carrying that pain, and you're retrying to play one of the most emotional pieces in the piano repertoire, without letting any of that real emotion touch the music?" When she put it that way, it sounded ridiculous. Maya had been treating her feelings like something separate from her playing, like two different compartments that shouldn't mix. Be professional. Keep emotions out of it. Focus on the technique. You're allowed to bring your real life into your music, Maya. That's not weakness. That's artistry. Dr. Okonkwo moved toward the door, then paused. "Stop trying to play what you think we want to hear. Stop trying to sound like other pianists. Stop analyzing and researching and overthinking. Just sit down and play something true, even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect, even if it hurts." After she left, Maya sat alone in the practice room for a long time. The afternoon light was starting to fade, casting long shadows across the floor. 4 days until the exam. 4 days to undo 16 years of training that had taught her to separate herself from her music. She thought about her grandmother's hands, the way they'd looked when Maya was 4, strong and confident on the keys. The way they looked now, according to her mother, trembling and uncertain, forgetting what they once knew how to do. Maya had been so focused on playing the nocturne correctly that she never stopped to think about what it actually meant to her. What story did she want to tell? Not Chopin's story. Not the story of a 20-year-old composer in 1830s Paris. Her story. Maya's story. And suddenly, sitting there in the fading light, she knew what that story was. It was about memory, about love. about watching someone you care about slowly disappear, about the way music can connect us to people even when everything else falls away, about hands that once taught can now forget. She didn't play the nocturne that evening. She was too tired, too emotionally drained. But for the first time since the failed exam, she felt like maybe she was heading in the right direction. Not because she'd found a technique or a trick, but because she'd finally stopped running from the truth. The truth that you can't make meaningful art while keeping yourself out of it. The truth that vulnerability isn't a flaw in performance, it's the entire point. The truth that sometimes you have to break down completely before you can build yourself back up into something real. Maya gathered her things and headed back to her dorm. 4 days left. 4 days to be brave enough to stop hiding. 4 days to figure out how to let her heart and her fingers finally work together instead of fighting each other. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but at least now she was walking in the right direction. The call came at 11 p.m. on September 27th, just 3 days before Maya's second jury exam. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about the piano, when her phone lit up with her mother's face on the screen. Maya almost didn't answer. Late-night calls from Shanghai had started to mean bad news. But she picked up anyway. Her mother's face appeared, and this time the lighting was different. She wasn't in the living room. She was in what looked like her grandmother's bedroom, the one with the pale blue wallpaper and the window that overlooked the neighborhood park. Maya could see the edge of her grandmother's bed in the frame. "I wanted to show you something," her mother said softly, adjusting the camera angle. "Wait, let me turn the phone around." The image shifted, and suddenly Maya was looking at her grandmother. Peep-Ho was sitting in a chair by the window, wearing a light pink cardigan that Maya recognized from years ago. Her hair, once black, was now completely white and cut short. She was staring out the window and nothing in particular, her hands resting in her lap. Those hands that had once moved across piano keys with such certainty now looked small and still. "I played her the recording you sent last month," her mother said from behind the camera. "The one of you practicing the Chopin piece." She didn't respond at first, but then her mother's voice caught. "Just watch." Maya heard her own playing start from her mother's phone speaker. The recording from August, before any of this had happened. Before the failed exam, before the panic, before the breakdown. It was technically perfect and emotionally empty, just like everything she'd been playing for years. The video call from Shanghai showed my grandmother sitting by the window, her expression completely blank. I started to play, my fingers moving across the keys of the practice room piano. The notes of Chopin's Nocturne filled the small dorm room, traveling thousands of miles across the ocean. But she didn't react. She just kept staring out the window, her face empty. That's when my chest felt like it cracked open. This was dementia. Not some dramatic scene from a movie. Just absence. A person who was once so vibrant, now somewhere I couldn't reach. The music, my technically perfect, soulless performance, meant nothing. My mom turned the camera back to her own tear-streaked face. "I'm sorry, Bao Bei," she whispered. I thought maybe the music would reach her. They say it sometimes can, but I don't think she even knows what she's hearing. After we hung up, I sat in the dark. My roommate was asleep. The world outside was just a normal Thursday night in Boston. Cars passed, people laughed. Everything was normal, but my world felt like it was ending. I couldn't stop thinking about my grandmother teaching me to play when I was 4. Her apartment always smelled like jasmine tea and the soup dumplings she made on Sundays. Her old, probably out-of-tune piano seemed like the most magical thing in the world to me. "Put your hands here, Xiaobao," she'd said, her own hands guiding my tiny fingers to middle C. "Press gently, like you're touching a flower petal." She would wrap her arms around me, her warmth a constant comfort, patiently explaining how to curve my fingers, how to keep my wrists loose, how to listen. "Piano is not about the fingers, Zhu Bao," she always said. "It is about what the fingers carry from your heart." I was too young to get it then. All I wanted was to hit the right notes, to make her happy. And for the next 15 years, that's what I did. I focused on getting every note perfect. It won me awards, scholarships, a spot at one of the best music schools in the country. But somewhere along the way, I forgot the most important part. I forgot about the heart. I got out of bed and walked over to the conservatory. The building was quiet, that special late-night kind of quiet where every footstep echoes. I found an empty practice room, turned on the small lamp by the piano, and just sat there, staring at the keys. I didn't need the sheet music. The piece was burned into my memory. But this time, I wasn't thinking about the notes. I was thinking about my grandmother's hands. Young hands teaching a 4-year-old, older hands clapping proudly at my recitals, and now, hands that had forgotten their own language. I closed my eyes and let myself truly remember. Not the polished, happy memories, but the real ones. The smell of her apartment, the sound of her Shanghai accent, the way she'd click her tongue when I made a mistake, the warmth in her smile when I finally got it right. I remembered my first competition at 12. I was so nervous I could barely breathe. I came in third and felt like a complete failure. Afterward, my grandmother took my hands and told me, "The winners played the notes better. But you played with heart. That matters more. Don't forget that." But I did forget. I spent years chasing perfection, pushing the heart part down until I couldn't feel it anymore. My fingers found the keys, not because I decided to play, but as if they had a will of their own. The opening notes of the Nocturne emerged, but they sounded different. Softer, more hesitant, more real. This time, the melody wasn't just a series of notes. It was my grandmother's young, strong hands guiding mine. The steady rhythm in my left hand wasn't just a harmonic pattern. It was her constant, reliable presence throughout my entire childhood. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't stop. The music swelled, the notes becoming all the years of lessons, the triumphs, the frustrations, the entire journey she had guided me on. And then I reached the part where the theme returns, but it's changed. It's fragile, delicate. I'd always played it with technical precision, but I never understood why Chopin wrote it that way. Now I knew. It was memory itself. It was how we remember things, not exactly as they were, but through the filter of time and loss. It was seeing my grandmother's strong hands through the lens of what they are now. This time, I wasn't just playing the notes. I was playing for her, for me, for everything we had lost, and everything that could never be taken away. I was finally playing with my heart. Her playing got quieter as she approached this section, each note careful and precious. This was her grandmother's hands now, trembling, uncertain, forgetting what they once knew how to do. And Maya's job wasn't to fix that, or change it, or make it something else. Her job was just to honor it, to acknowledge it, to let the music carry the weight of that truth. The piece builds toward the end, but Maya didn't play it triumphantly. She played it like a goodbye, like someone holding on to something precious, even as it slips away. The final measures came, those last few notes that fade into silence. When she finished, she let her hands rest on the keys for a long moment, feeling the vibrations die away. Only then did she open her eyes. The practice room looked the same. Same beige walls, same old piano, same fluorescent light buzzing quietly in the corner. But something fundamental had shifted. Maya had just played the Nocturne in E-flat major, the way she'd been playing it for months, hitting all the same notes in all the same order. But for the first time, she'd actually said something. She played it again. And this time, different memories surfaced. Different moments with her grandmother. Different feelings. The music shifted and changed to carry these new truths. She wasn't trying to manufacture emotion anymore. She was just letting herself feel what was already there and allowing her hands to translate it. She played it a third time. By now, it was almost 1 in the morning. Her fingers were tired, her eyes were swollen from crying, and her back hurt from sitting on the bench for so long. But this version was different still, because grief isn't just one thing, it's layers. Anger at the unfairness of disease, gratitude for the years you had, regret for things left unsaid, fear of what comes next, and underneath all of it, love. Just pure, simple, complicated love. When she finished the third time, Maya sat in the quiet practice room and realized something that Dr. Okonkwo had been trying to tell her all along. You can't separate yourself from your music. Your life, your experiences, your pain, your joy, all of it feeds into what comes out through your fingers. Trying to play without letting yourself be vulnerable is like trying to speak without using your voice. She pulled out her phone and sent a message to her mother, even though it was 2 in the afternoon in Shanghai, and her mother was probably at work. Tell P. Po I love her, even if she doesn't understand. Tell her every day. 3 dots appeared immediately. Her mother must have been on break. I will, Bao Bei. Every single day, Maya gathered her things and walked back to the dorm through the quiet Austin streets. It was late September now, and there was a chill in the air that promised October was coming soon. The leaves on the trees were turning gold and red. The city felt peaceful at this hour, like it was taking a breath before tomorrow arrived. Back in her room, Jenna stirred as Maya climbed into bed. You okay? She mumbled, half asleep. Yeah, Maya said, and for the first time in 2 weeks, it was true. I think I'm going to be okay. She had 2 more days until the jury exam. 2 more days to practice this new way of playing, this vulnerable, honest, heart-forward approach. It still scared her. Opening yourself up like that, letting judges see not just your technique, but your actual soul, was terrifying. What if they didn't like what they saw? What if her story wasn't good enough? But Maya was starting to understand that those were the wrong questions. The right question was, could she stand in front of those judges and play something true? Could she honor her grandmother, her memories, and her own journey by being brave enough to stop hiding? She thought she could. She thought she finally could. Because the alternative, continuing to play beautiful music beautifully while keeping herself out of it entirely, was no longer an option. That version of Maya had broken down in practice room 7B 10 days ago. What was emerging now was someone new, someone scared but honest, someone imperfect but real. And maybe that was exactly who she needed to be. September 30th arrived with unexpected sunshine. Maya woke up at 7 a.m. without needing an alarm, her body somehow knowing this was the day. Through the dorm window, she could see clear blue sky and golden leaves catching the morning light. It felt like the universe was trying to tell her something, though she wasn't sure what. Jenna was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed with a mug of tea. Big day, she said simply. How are you feeling? Maya thought about it. 2 weeks ago, she would have said terrified. 1 week ago, she would have said hopeless. But this morning, sitting in the warm September sunlight streaming through their window, she felt something different. Ready, she said. I think I'm actually ready. She didn't practice that morning. That was new. Normally, before any performance, she'd spend hours warming up, running through the piece multiple times, drilling the difficult passages. But something told her that more practice would only get in the way now. She'd done the work. She'd found what she needed to find. Now she just had to trust herself enough to share it. Instead, she took a long shower, made herself breakfast at the dining hall, actually tasting the food instead of eating mechanically while reviewing fingerings in her head. She called her mother in Shanghai, even though it was late evening there. Wish P-Po good luck for me, Maya said. I'm playing for her today. Her mother's voice was thick with emotion. She'd be so proud of you, Bao Bei. Wherever she is in her mind right now, I know she'd be proud. At 10:15, Maya walked into the conservatory building, wearing a simple black dress and her grandmother's jade bracelet that her mother had sent her years ago. She'd never worn it to a performance before, always worried it might click against the piano or distract her. But today, it felt right. A small piece of her grandmother, traveling with her. The hallway outside Recital Hall C was empty, just like it had been 2 weeks ago. But this time, the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt like possibility, like a blank page waiting to be filled with whatever truth she was brave enough to write. Through the small, diamond-shaped window in the door, Maya watched them. 3 figures, seated, waiting. The legends of the conservatory. Her heart, a steady drum against her ribs, not frantic, but resolute. She drew a slow, deliberate breath, the air cool in her lungs, a stark contrast to the warmth that bloomed in her memory. A flashback, brief but vivid, the scent of jasmine tea steam curling into the air of her grandmother's small Shanghai apartment. The worn ivory keys of an old, upright piano, a silent promise under her young fingers. Her grandmother's voice, a soft melody itself, telling her, play what your heart needs to say, Not what you think they want to hear. The proctor called her name. The door opened. Maya walked into the sun-drenched recital hall, her steps measured, purposeful. The room was vast, but her world narrowed to the path leading to the gleaming black Steinway grand piano, a magnificent beast basking in the afternoon light. She didn't rush. She approached it like an old friend, a confidant. A slight bow to the three professors, a silent acknowledgement, and then she sat. Her hands, which had been so steady just moments before, now hovered over the keys, trembling with a life of their own. She closed her eyes for a second. Another breath, another memory of Jasmine and love. Then she began. The first notes fell into the quiet hall like raindrops on a still pond, creating ripples of sound that expanded to fill the space. Her hands didn't just play. They danced, they sculpted, they told a story. It wasn't about technical perfection anymore, though every note was precise. It was about the narrative woven between them. The visuals in her mind were as clear as the notes she played. The bustling streets of Shanghai, the quiet evenings with her grandmother, the lonely hours spent in practice rooms, the frustration, the breakthroughs, the joy. Across the room, the judge's initial expressions of professional detachment began to melt away. Dr. Hartman, a man known for his stern, almost impenetrable critiques, leaned forward, his brow furrowed not in judgment, but in deep concentration. Professor Wu, a virtuoso from her own city, a ghost from her grandmother's stories, had a gaze that was utterly absorbed, her eyes seeing something far beyond the room. And Dr. Okonkwo, whose warmth was as legendary as her musical ear, had a soft, genuine smile gracing her lips, her head nodding almost imperceptibly with the music's rhythm. Maya felt their attention, not as pressure, but as a shared space, a communion. They were no longer judges. They were listeners, and she was the storyteller. The music flowed, a river of emotion carrying them all along its current. She was no longer just playing the piano. She was speaking through it, her truest, most honest self finally given a voice. The tempo quickened, the chords grew richer, more complex. The music swelled into a powerful crescendo, a wave of sound crashing against the silent shores of the hall. With the rising music came the flood of memories, no longer just gentle flashbacks, but a torrent of emotion. Years of sacrifice, of discipline. Waking before dawn to practice scales until her fingers were numb. The calluses, the aches, the sheer, unrelenting stubbornness it took to keep going. She saw her grandmother's face, her loving encouragement a constant beacon. She remembered the day her grandmother had passed, the music becoming her only solace, the piano keys her only way to weep. This performance was for her. Every note was a testament to that unwavering love, a tribute to the woman who first saw the music inside her. Tears began to well in Maya's eyes, not of sadness, but of a profound, overwhelming love and gratitude. They traced paths down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. They were part of the story. She wasn't just playing the music. She was living it, breathing it, her entire being poured into the keys. The melody soared, a cry of both sorrow and triumph, a raw, emotional truth laid bare for all to witness. The professors were no longer just listening. They were feeling. Dr. Okonkwo pressed a hand to her chest, her own eyes glistening. Professor Wu's absorbed gaze now held a deep personal empathy. Even Dr. Hartman's stern facade had completely crumbled, his face a mask of profound, unguarded emotion. In that moment, the years of practice, the technical drills, the relentless pursuit of perfection, all coalesced into the single beautiful, heartbreaking truth. And then, as slowly and deliberately as it began, the music started to recede. The torrent calmed, the river slowed, flowing gently toward its end. The final notes were soft, ethereal, like whispers in the twilight. They hung in the air for a moment, shimmering, before fading away into a silence that was more profound, more resonant than any sound that had preceded it. It was a sacred silence, filled with the echoes of the story that had just been told. Maya's hands lifted from the keys, hovering for a moment as if reluctant to let go. Her face, still wet with tears, was serene, peaceful. She had left nothing unsaid. She had poured her entire soul into the music, and now there was only a quiet, beautiful emptiness. She slowly opened her eyes, her gaze finding the three figures across the room. They were still, caught in the afterglow of the performance. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The silence held them all. Finally, Dr. Hartman, the stoic critic, broke the spell. He cleared his throat, his voice quiet, almost a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a final verdict across the hall. He looked directly at Maya, his eyes holding a newfound respect, a deep understanding. "Now," he said, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. "That was music. Thank you so much for joining us on this emotional journey today. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel for more tales of artistry and passion. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time." Dr. Okonkwo was smiling through her own tears. "That's what I've been waiting to hear from you," she said, her voice warm with pride. "Not just technically excellent playing, not just a good interpretation, but you, your story, your truth." That was breathtaking. Dr. Hartman shuffled her papers, but Maya could tell it was just something to do with her hands while she composed herself. "You pass your jury examination with the highest marks," she said formally. "But more than that, Miss Chun, you have shown us what it means to grow as an artist, to find courage, to be willing to break down so you can build yourself back up into something real." Maya felt something release in her chest, something that had been locked tight for years. She'd spent so long being afraid of not being good enough, of failing, of disappointing people. But what she de-learned in these 2 weeks was that the real failure would have been continuing to play beautifully while keeping her heart locked away. "Thank you," Maya managed to say, her voice rough with emotion, "for stopping me 2 weeks ago, for giving me a second chance, for teaching me what music is actually supposed to be." Professor Wu grinned. "We're supposed to be the teachers, but I think you just taught us something too. About honesty in art, about what happens when someone is brave enough to be vulnerable in front of an audience." As Maya gathered her things and walked out of the recital hall, she felt fundamentally different than she had walking in. Not because she'd passed the exam, though that mattered, but because she discovered something essential about herself and about music that she couldn't unlearn now, even if she wanted to. The hallway was filled with late morning sunshine. Other students were hurrying to classes, practicing in distant rooms, living their normal conservatory lives. Maya pulled out her phone and found a voice recording app. She wanted to capture this performance while it was still fresh, wanted to send it to her mother to play for her grandmother, even if Peepo didn't understand, even if she couldn't remember who Maya was or what music meant, even if the sounds just washed over her like water over stones. Maya needed her to hear it, needed some part of her grandmother, however distant and unreachable, to know that her lessons had taken root. Over the next few months, Maya's entire approach to music transformed. She stopped choosing pieces because they looked good on a resume and started choosing them because they meant something to her personally. She volunteered every Tuesday evening at a memory care facility in Brookline, playing piano for dementia patients and their families. Some of them responded to the music. Some didn't, but Maya played for them anyway, understanding now that music's value isn't measured by the response it gets, but by the truth it carries. She started a program at the conservatory called Music and Memory, teaching other technically proficient students how to connect emotionally with their instruments. The first workshop had 8 participants. By the end of the semester, there were 43 students on the waiting list. Her grandmother passed away in February, on a cold Tuesday morning in Shanghai. Maya flew home for the funeral, missing a week of classes. At the service, surrounded by family and friends who'd known her grandmother for decades, Maya played the Nocturne in E-flat major one more time. This version was different from all the others, because grief changes, love changes, memory changes, and music, when it's honest, changes with them. When Maya returned to Boston for her senior year, she was invited to perform a solo recital in the conservatory's main concert hall. The concert was scheduled for November 3rd, exactly 1 year and 1 month after her failed jury exam. She dedicated the entire program to her grandmother, and the hall was standing room only. Dr. Hartman attended, sitting in the 5th row with perfect posture. Professor Wu was there too, wearing a Nirvana t-shirt under his jacket. Dr. Okonkwo sat in the front row, beaming with pride. But Maya didn't play for them. She played for her grandmother. For every student who'd ever been told they were technically proficient, but emotionally vacant. For everyone who'd ever built walls around their heart, thinking that was what professionalism meant. She played with her whole self. Every piece was a story, a memory, a truth she was brave enough to share. And when the concert ended, and the audience rose to their feet in applause, Maya understood that this was what her grandmother had been trying to teach her all along. Music isn't about perfect execution. It's about perfect honesty. It's about taking all the messy, complicated, beautiful, painful stuff of being human and translating it into sound. It's about finding the courage to be vulnerable in front of people who might judge you, and doing it anyway, because the alternative is living a life where everything sounds pretty, but nothing means anything. The lesson Maya learned didn't just apply to music. It applied to everything. To relationships, to work, to how we move through the world. We spend so much time trying to be perfect, trying to hide our flaws and weaknesses and real emotions. But perfection is boring. Perfection is forgettable. What people remember, what actually touches them and changes them and stays with them, is authenticity. Truth, the willingness to stand up and say, this is who I am, this is what I've experienced, this is what I carry in my heart. Maya's hands had always been capable of telling a powerful musical story. She just needed to give them something worth saying. And once she did, once she stopped hiding behind technique and started speaking from her heart, everything changed. Not just her playing, her entire life. Because in the end, that's what art is for. Not to showcase how skilled we are, but to connect us. To remind us we're not alone in our joy or our grief. To create moments of shared humanity where someone else's truth resonates with our own. To turn the specific into the universal and the personal into something everyone can feel. That's what Maya's grandmother had known all along. That's what those patient, loving hands had been trying to teach her from the very beginning. And even though those hands were gone now, even though they'd forgotten their own language before the end, their lesson remained. Piano is not about the fingers. It's about what the fingers carry from your heart. And when you're brave enough to carry the truth, when you're willing to be vulnerable and honest and real, that's when the magic happens. That's when technique becomes art. That's when notes become music. That's when you finally understand what it means to truly play.